Hello, everyone. This is Omnixius, and I am the writer of the Dragon Knight Prophecy and head of the Necromancer, and I'm going to kill a fly that's in my room. Anyway, I want to talk about my stories and about editing, because I get a lot of comments from people that I tell a good story, but my grammar is terrible. And you're absolutely right. It is. It is absolutely terrible, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to go over this as quickly as I can, and I'm going to leave out a lot of detail. The fact of the matter is, I don't understand language, English and language. I can read it, I can write it, in my own sloppy way, but a lot of punctuation, a lot of what word, just calling something a verb or an adverb or a clause or a participle or whatever. I don't know what any of that means. I failed English my first 8 years of school. I only went on and kept moving up because my parents kept threatening to sue the school because I kept straight A's in every other class. I'd get perfect scores in every other class, And their logic was, how is it he's honor rolling everything except this one class, and then he's so bad in this class that he's failing it? And so they blame the school. It has to be a problem with the school. It has to be a problem with teachers. It has to, and the school just got sick of fighting them, so they just passed me up. When I got to high school, they put me in the lowest possible English class. It was basically like an introduction to alphabet letters, And there were 4 other kids in the class. There were 5 of us total. It was basic as it could be. But that's the level of English education I got. Once I became, I came out of high school. I didn't go to college. I dabbled at going into a junior college because I wanted to go into engineering, but they had kind of an introductory course to that. But you know what? I couldn't afford to go on to anything major, and I wasn't going to get a scholarship, and my family certainly couldn't afford it. So I ended up working in computer IT. It was something I was really good at. But the long and short of it is I never dreamed I was going to write. I loved to tell stories, and I loved to write myself these little stories. And I loved to write when I was going through school. I got in a lot of altercations with other kids. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of problems at home with my own family. And I would lock myself away in a closet somewhere and just write myself a little story to take myself away to another fantasy world. As an adult, I got married. I made some sound investments. I put some money away, and life was pretty good. And then life turned, and I lost all my money, and my sound investments fell apart, and things went wrong. I could do 20 minutes now listing off all the things that went wrong in just the past couple of years. Both of my dogs died. The wife nearly died. She nearly lost her leg. She ended up crippled. She ended up in a rehab center for months, and then we didn't have health insurance because other things had happened prior to this happening, and I was trying to save money and cut the budget down to get us back in the green. So I canceled our health insurance, thinking we weren't going to need it, and I could turn it back on as soon as we leveled out again. And then she ended up in the hospital. So all these things happened and more. Like I said, I could go 20 minutes just discussing all the terrible things that went wrong. The long and short of it is I ended up under an immense amount of stress. And I didn't know what to do about it. I was suicidal. I was alone at night. The wife was in the hospital. I was here. The dogs had died. And I was alone. I was sitting in a dark room. The only light I had was the computer monitor that was turned on. I didn't want to turn anything on because I didn't want to use electricity. So this was my life. I had reached this point. I wasn't working. I'd lost my job. I was running, everything was on credit cards, and everything was spiraling out of control. So I went back to my childhood, and I was in my dark little space, and I started writing. And I started my story with a man who was in a cave holding a torch. And I described how the light of his torch was his only companion. And what I was describing was myself. I was alone in this tiny little office with just the light of the computer. This was my only companion. I had hit this point in my life. And I proceeded to tell a story about a man who was going into this valley knowing he was going to die. He was essentially committing suicide. This was it. He had embarked on a mission to do something and he failed. He had come to a point in his life where everything that he had ever worked for was gone. It was about to be swept away for good, and he had failed. And he was going into that valley to face this monster, hoping that it was going to kill him, that this was going to be the end. I was describing myself. I was absolutely describing myself. But then something happened. I fell into this sort of trance. I want to call it a trance because I was making this up as I go, guys. I was telling myself a story to try to take my mind off my problems, and instead what started to happen was my emotions and my problems started to pour out. And instead of him dying, he encounters a wounded dragon who's also dying, who is, of course, my wife. My wife is in the hospital, dying, essentially. The doctors are telling me she could die at any moment. She's that bad off. And I didn't realize it was as I wrote it, but I wrote all this. Another funny thing too, if you look up the meaning of people's names, right? Now, my wife's name isn't Lily, but if you look up what the name Lily means, there are synonyms to other people's names. It says, Lily is also known as this name in this language, or this name in this language, and one of those names is my wife's name. I didn't do that intentionally. It just happened. So here I am writing our story. This first chapter is our life falling apart and both of us reaching the point where it's just like we wish we could die. It has so fallen apart. And I got so embroiled in the story, I lost track of time. I stopped eating. All I wanted to do was write. The story helped. It took me out of my pain. It took me to this fantasy world. And suddenly all the pain I was feeling was actually Gersius's. It wasn't mine. I was watching this unfold. I wasn't actually feeling it myself. And it slowly but surely, the story took another turn. And it led to a great love story, a great moment of love and triumph, and the character on a path to rebuilding everything that was lost. So, this is all fine and dandy, but I was just writing it for myself, which means it had terrible grammar, terrible spelling. It had problems all over the place. I mean, there were things wrong with it everywhere. But I sat down and I decided, you know what? This turned into a real story. By the time I stopped writing it, I was like 20 chapters in. By the time I sat back and I said, what am I doing? Every night, every day and every night, if I have a free minute, I'm at the computer writing this. What am I doing? And I realized I had a full book written. I went back and I started editing it the best I could. And I realized I don't know anything about English. I realized it's like, okay, I know punctuation needs to be here, but I don't know which ones. I know questions end in question marks. And I know commas are used for something. And if the sentence doesn't end in a question mark, it ends in a period. I knew that. But there was so much I didn't know. And I started the painfully slow process of trying to teach myself. I finally got into Grammarly. I loaded the story up in Grammarly. It had 700 and something errors in it. Just spelling errors. And then, 1,000 or something, just grammatical errors. But I used Grammarly to highlight where my mistakes were. And then I went to Google to teach myself. Okay, Grammarly's saying that I've done this wrong. What is that? I don't know what that means. So go to Google and read that. It's like, okay, I kind of get that. The thing is I really don't get it. I try as I might. English and grammar don't work for me. It's one of those things that I just can't learn. So knowing this, I reached out. Friends, family, acquaintances from my Minecraft server, everyone I could do. I even joined 2 different writers groups at the libraries, and I joined a creative writing group for adults that was just held by this guy in his house. And I tried to meet people and rub elbows and let people know I was working on this story, but I really needed help with grammar. I couldn't get anybody to help. Most of the people I know are no better at it than I am, to be honest. And then the few people I know, like the writers groups and stuff like that, they just weren't interested. So I realized the only way these stories are ever going to get cleaned up is if I can hire a professional editor. I'm literally going to have to go to like Fiverr and pay somebody. And I explored this option too. I went to Fiverr. I contacted a few of them. They wanted word counts. They want, what is the story about? Blah, blah, blah. And the cheapest price I've been given is $3,700 to do a full one-time edit of the book. And they're not even going to do like the full edit. They're going to send me a copy of it where it's all double spaced. And then they're going to write underneath it what's wrong with everything. And then I have to fix it. So that's what they want for $3,700. I can't afford it. To this day, I still don't have a job. I have never been able to replace my job. When my wife came home from the rehab center, she still couldn't walk. It took me months of doing her therapy myself. I had to wash her. I had to feed her. I had to cook and clean and do all the household things because she was bedridden. And then I had to get her up out of bed and get her into a chair and then do all these leg exercises with her and do all these arm exercises. And she can walk now. I have successfully gotten her back up on her feet, gotten her walking, and life is improving. But all of that stress is what started the Dragon Knight. Otherwise, I'd have never started writing. And I consider it a blessing. In hindsight, all the things I went through, I consider a blessing. Because the Dragon Knight story is everything to me. It means absolutely everything to me. It is my heart. It is my joy. It's what I dream about at night. And it's my life. It really is. It hurts me that so few people read it. Of all the effort I have put into this story, Royal Road has actually been very bad to it. It has nothing to do with the people who run Royal Road, of course, but it's just people aren't looking for this kind of story there. And I don't know what else to do with it or where to go with it. But I also know that the grammar is terrible. And I have pleaded and pleaded and pleaded with I went back to acquaintances that from years ago that I knew, well, maybe this person sounded like they knew grammar. Maybe they can help me. I haven't been able to get anyone to help, guys. No friends, no family, writers groups, nothing. I'm going to have to pay an editor to edit in order to get any of this stuff done, and I just can't afford it. I have done the best job I can. Grammar is just that one, lots of us have something we're not very good at. Some measure of education and learning that we're just not good at. Grammar is mine. In fact, grammar is so alien to me, there are times where I want to quit writing because of how bad I am at it. And I know I'm bad. And even though I sit there and I know the difference between the different versions of your, and I know the different versions of we're, and yet I still use the wrong ones. I do it with horde. I do it with so many words. I add extra words in that don't need to be there. I repeat myself. I have dialogue that just runs in circles. I have Gersius reuse. He kind of restates his point of view 3 times in the same paragraph. He's saying the same thing. I could have just put a comma between the 3 statements and shortened them all and just been done with it in one statement. I've grown to the point where I can see that, but it's not going to get done unless I can afford to pay someone. I just wanted to record this to let people know that I know it's bad, and I am really sorry. I'm a storyteller. I'm not a writer. And I only started this story because I was in so much pain. I was physically myself in so much pain, and I wanted to get it out. So I wrote it out onto paper, essentially. And, it became my kind of therapy. And then once it turned into this big, giant thing, I kind of wanted to share it. Because I thought it was a beautiful love story. I thought it went somewhere I hadn't expected it to go. I kind of expected the story to end up being a very sad tale of somebody who sort of hangs on too long and then dies in the end. That's where I thought it was going. And instead, it turned into this love story and this whole sort of redemption. The character deciding that he's going to go on and he's going to rebuild. And he is going to achieve his goals in the end, no matter how hard the road ahead of him gets. And that's where we're at. Anyway, I don't want to pad this on any longer. I just wanted to record this and let people know that I am sorry the grammar is so bad. And I'm a storyteller. I hope you can see past it. But, I understand if you can't. And you don't need to keep telling me how bad it is. I love this story. I love these characters. And I'll tell you what, that recent posting I put up about having a story arc, changing the story so that Lily becomes tainted, essentially. She falls and their love is kind of damaged, or badly damaged. So many of you wrote me impassioned letters. You private messaged me, or you put them on Patreon, or you put them on Royal Road, and you explained to me just how much the characters meant to you, and how much in particular Garcias meant to you, and the love he was getting from Lily and Thale, how you couldn't bear to see that love damaged, because Garcias had gone through so much pain and suffering to get to this point that you couldn't bear to see him go through that kind of pain again. And that, you guys telling me that gave me a level of appreciation for my audience that I didn't have before. And I realized what a mistake I would be making to go down that line. I looked at it and I went, this will never happen. I am never going to consider this line again. Now, of course, I have people emailing me from the other side like, oh man, I really wanted to read that line. It sounded so amazing. Can you post it somewhere else so we can read it? You know what? I don't think I can. If people really want it and you want to send me some private messages asking for it, if enough people contact me, I'll reconsider it. But I don't know that I want to put my mindset into finishing that. You know what I mean? Now that I know what my readers really care about in the story, I kind of want to focus on that. So anyway, I'm here. I am babbling on when I said I was going to cut this short. So anyway, thank you all. I hope this explains why the grammar is so bad, and I hope someday I can fix it, because I love this story, and I would love to see it, on a bookshelf at a bookstore. I would love to get it to a wider audience. I would love to make this my life, telling this story, and then after this story arc is done and the whole Dragon Knight prophecy is done, going on to tell the next story arc about maybe just, I have a whole book written about just the characters' lives in the valley, where they're happy. There's no more war. There's no more struggle. They're just living their day-to-day lives, and they're loving one another. And I think there's a lot of you who would be interested in reading that. It'd be like, instead of just getting the one chapter, the last few pages of the last chapter where it says basically they lived happily ever after, getting an entire book of, and this is what they did in that happily ever after. I think a lot of you would love that. Anyway, here I am babbling again. Thank you all. I hope you found this insightful, and I will catch you in the next one.